morning, yogis. It's a beautiful Saturday. I wanted to talk about breathing a little bit more. So I know that I provided a video recently of a guided meditation and kind of breathing with some movement. But I kind of feel like it needed a little bit of context as to why breathing is so important. And in order to really go into that, we kind of need to first define yoga. And I know that I've spoken a little bit about it. My very first video live I did, I talked about how yoga is powerful to me and why it's so important to me, and how it's helped me, but that never really explained what the process of yoga is. I know I spoke that it is a process, but let's kind of talk about what the yoga process is, and then we'll talk about why breathing is so important in the yoga process. So to begin, the yoga process, you have to kind of define what yoga literally means. Yoga, the literal word, is Sanskrit for yoke. And by that they mean like to yoke together, like conjoin. Like whenever, if you played Oregon Trail, you yoked your oxen. And that's basically you joined oxen together. And yeah, so yoga means to yoke. That's the literal meaning of it in Sanskrit. The process of yoga literally is kind of really just about yoking or joining, bringing together all the parts of our being. So our mind, our body, and our spirit all together in one, as one, into a conscious space that we can observe and modify as necessary for our growth. Since yoga is all about self-discovery and growth, and the yoga process's ultimate objective is to achieve growth and internal growth and evolution and finding that truth. Really, it's about living your best life. In yoga, that's what we're trying to do here. Since that's what it's about, it's basically about bringing all these parts together so that you can do that, so you can follow through with that process. So basically, there are a couple ways that you can partake in the yoga process. There's, we're mostly familiar with asana, or the poses, the postures that, you see in regular yoga classes all over. We can do chanting and meditation, which obviously we've all heard of both things. The chanting probably sounds kind of weird because that's not really something we do in this society, but we do have things like prayer and, we have mantras. People have used mantras all the time. So those are some ways that you do it, but really the foundation of even those is breathing. So kind of understanding why breathing is important is really a good place to start when understanding the process of yoga. So there are three big reasons why yoga or breathing is important. The main one is probably the most obvious one, and you will literally die if you don't breathe. So physiologically, without getting too technical, through the process of cellular respiration, and every time we take a breath in, we inhale oxygen. We all know that. We exhale carbon monoxide. We all know that as well. And what happens in between those two things, is you breathe in oxygen, it starts basically a chain reaction in your body where basically like electricity happens and things happen, and your body creates energy with that oxygen that you breathe in that your cells can then use, and then your cells use that energy to carry out their functions and communicate with other cells, which then creates organs, and then their organs function, and that creates us and our ability to live. So literally breathing, without it, you will die. And we all know that. We all know that if you don't breathe, it's like 6 minutes and you're dead. You're done. So that's like the main reason why breathing is so important. That's a big reason anyway, that breathing is so important. Physiologically, we can't live without it. In yoga, breath, the Sanskrit word for that is prana, or can also be translated to life force. That makes a lot of sense, because if we don't breathe, we die. So breath literally is our life force. So physically, it's very important to breathe. Another reason that breathing is so important is it helps us mentally. So there's science in this too. Psychologically, we know that when we're under stress, first of all, our body has a response. So typically we'll start breathing really shallow. We might hyperventilate. We panic. Our mind gets kind of narrow. We focus our our attention to something, we basically go into survival mode. So when we're under stress, we can't learn very well. We don't remember things very well. We don't process things very well mentally. So, and most of us live in some kind of state of stress most of the time. So breathing, and this is all science here, breathing helps you focus your mind. So if you're stressed, one of the best things you can do is take a deep breath. And almost instantly, as long as you breathe, intentionally and deeply, you might feel an instant relief from that stress. You might feel instantly like, oh, I'm clear. And it can be intense and very obvious. Sometimes not so much, you kind of have to focus on it. But really, even just taking a deep breath can do wonders to our mind. So through like meditation and chanting and mantras and things like that, we can really get our mind focused, calm, which then allows us to broaden our perspective. Because again, when you're under stress, you don't think as well, you don't think as clearly, you're not seeing a big picture, you're tunnel vision survival mode. So when you take a breath, when you breathe, and when you meditate, when you practice breathing, it helps to focus your mind and clear out your mind. And that sounds how we hear like, oh, clear your mind. Like that's what you do when you meditate. That's not like literal. You're not literally trying to empty your mind and have no thoughts or nothing going on whatsoever up there. But really the intention is to slow everything down, to bring everything into a clearer focus, so that then you can actually observe your mind stuff. The vritti, we've talked about that, the vritti in your mind, the stuff that just kind of repeats, that goes on, that's just churning, that just kind of happens automatically. That way you can kind of slow that stuff down and narrow it down and focus. And that's necessary because when in the process of yoga, as we're uncovering layers of ourselves and we're going through this self-discovery, being able to slow down and focus and giving yourself that broadened perspective, that allows you more space to actually observe what's going on inside you and allows you more clarity to be able to actually make modifications as necessary. So physically, we die without breathing, prana, life force. Mentally, our mind parts benefit really a lot from breathing because it helps us slow down, helps us find that alignment internally. If we can slow down and focus, we can then kind of focus on what's going on inside us. And so that helps us focus our mind. Now, the third thing that's really important about breathing and why it's kind of fundamental in the yoga process is because it does also nourish our spiritual side. So spiritually, like this might be kind of hokey to people who are either, not spiritual or don't claim to be spiritual. Maybe you're atheist or, there's kind of like, you just don't have a regular practice in this way. You don't feel spiritual. So this might sound really hokey to you and kind of bizarre and unbelievable, and that's totally understandable. And I can talk more about that another time. But as far as like the spiritual part of breathing, if you do have a prayer practice, you understand how it can actually be very calming, and it's centering to breathe in prayer. And so like we can do this in meditation, chanting, prayer, however, but really what happens whenever we breathe, of course, our mind focuses, we're able to get clarity, we're able to align ourselves. And then in that space, we have receptiveness to connect. So not only do we align and connect internally, we also are able to connect externally. And then if we are regulating ourselves in that way, where we're breathing, we're focusing, we're centering ourselves, we can then manifest energy. So that might be the part that's kind of hokey, where it's like, oh, manifest energy and send it out to the universe. But it's kind of real. So if you think about it, when somebody is experiencing an emotion, a strong emotion like anger, we'll just go with anger because we all know what that looks like, what that feels like. You can tell when someone is angry. They don't have to say anything. You don't even necessarily have to look at them. They don't have to make eye contact with you at all. You can feel it. You can literally feel that energy, the emotional energy that they have. And in anger, of course, that can lead to some maybe destruction. Not necessarily. Anger can be really productive as well, depending on how it's used. But you can feel it. The bottom line is you can feel when somebody is experiencing a strong emotion. And so if you think about that, we don't have tools to measure that. Maybe if we had some tools to measure that, external expression of emotion where we can actually feel it coming from other people, maybe more people would believe this. But you don't have to have tools to feel it and to know it and to just trust yourself that it's real and it's there. So if you think about it in that way, that we have this energy that happens inside us, it's emotional energy. Usually we can send it out. Usually we don't even control that. We don't think about that. It just happens. You get angry, everything gets sent out, everyone around you feels it. But imagine like an emotion like love, that, and like if you imagine that feeling, how that feels to share, that's positive. And again, we may not even control that. It just comes out. People feel it around us. But imagine if you could control that, if there was some regulation behind your emotion, and whenever you felt it, you could actually manifest it. And then whenever you manifested it, you could actually direct it outside of you intentionally, as opposed to just accidentally or randomly. Intentionally focus it outside of you. And that's kind of what prayer is, or, in yoga, spiritual nourishment is creating that connection from your internal self to the external self and calling out to the external world as well. So some people might call that God or spirit or source, that they call out to in an external way. But that is the spiritual part of yoga that we need to be mindful of, and breathing helps us get there as well. So in short, breathing is kind of the fundamental of the yoga practice. You can't really do any yoga without breathing. And in fact, you can just breathe and still do yoga. That's why yoga is for everybody, because really you can just breathe and focus intentionally and internally on your breathing. And then again, like I said, you can focus your mind, you can connect externally and in a spiritual way. It's all there. So breathing is fundamentally the most important part of yoga and the yoga process. It helps, as again, yoga is to yoke or conjoin. Breathing helps us bring and join all of those parts of our consciousness into consciousness, all of those parts of our existence into a forward consciousness where we can actually observe them and then again make adjustments as necessary. So we understand why breathing is important. There's the physical part, the mental part, and the spiritual part that is nourished by breathing. But how do we breathe? Because you're thinking probably like, well, happens automatically, right? Yeah, it's pretty amazing that it happens automatically. Our bodies literally are designed to survive until they don't. So it's amazing that we don't have to think about breathing. Our bodies make it happen. Even if we stop breathing, our bodies do everything they can to make it happen again. If there's no medical intervention, our bodies have things that can kind of like kickstart breathing again. If they don't work, then we might die or we need medical intervention. But our bodies are pretty amazing. They make us live. They make us breathe, without us having to think about it. So how do we breathe? Like, how are we supposed to? Do I breathe wrong? Am I breathing incorrectly? Well, there's no right or wrong to anything, but there is a more efficient way to breathe, and that allows all these things to happen that I just described. So most of us don't think about our breathing. If you think, just sit there and think about it. You probably haven't thought about your breathing for a while. So try something real quick. Go ahead and just sit there with me and just kind of focus on your breathing. Don't change anything, don't adjust anything, just turn inward and focus on that breathing. Notice if it's shallow or ragged. Maybe it feels kind of pinched. Maybe you don't feel like you're getting a deep breath. Maybe it's fast. Maybe you're breathing rapidly. Maybe you breathe through your mouth and your nose. Just kind of feel that for a second. So for me, my pattern with breathing is my shoulders come forward. I'm kind of hunched. My gut is tight, and I breathe in my chest, like right here. That doesn't look very comfortable, does it? That doesn't look like I'm gonna be I look uncomfortable. And so that's kind of my pattern. Whenever I get stressed out, or whenever I'm just in my head doing something on the computer, it's my tendency to kind of just be here. So what you can do is just kind of sit there. Feel your breath. Feel those parts that you felt like it was kind of pinched or choked off, or like maybe you were breathing quickly, like you just realized maybe you weren't breathing. Sometimes we hold our breath. We don't even mean to. We just hold our breath. If you've ever passed out before, like that's pretty common, is like people pass out because they forget to breathe, or they just stop breathing. They get so nervous that they just stop breathing. So notice that stuff about yourself, and then kind of feel into the areas that feel tight or feel like they're restricted, and just kind of breathe into those spaces. If it feels difficult to get a big breath, think about where your collarbones are. Open up your collarbones. Bring your shoulders back, not like pinched back, because again, we're not trying to create tension, but just kind of relaxed and back in their sockets. And then breathe in your nose and out your nose. And do that 3 times. Intentionally breathe. Breathe deep into your chest where it lifts, and then push that breath down. Bring that breath down into your abdomen. And see if you notice a difference. Because chances are, if you're not thinking about your breathing and you're not trying to intentionally breathe, you're probably breathing in that pinched, cut off, quick, panicked, shortened way, whatever it is for you, all the time. You're probably breathing like that all the time. And so it's really important to actually practice breathing. More than anything else, it's important to practice breathing, because breathing regulates every part of our being. It regulates our body, it regulates our mind, it regulates our soul. And we need that in the yoga process. So when I first started learning about intentional breathing and how well it helped me actually manage my anxiety and stress, and it helped me think clearer in situations where I really was under pressure but needed to make a decision. When I first started practicing intentional breathing, I set a timer on my phone to go off, a reminder in my calendar to go off every 5 minutes. Obviously, that got old really fast, but I still kept with the pattern. I made a reminder once an hour in my phone. Breathe. Once an hour, I would have a bell go off on my phone that would make me remember to breathe. After a while, that kind of became habit. So I only needed to do like 2 hours. And I did this. I did 2 hours. And then I did like half a day. So I'd do like 4 or 6 hours. And then like waking, obviously asleep. I'm asleep. But I did like 4 or 6 hours. I would do a breathing reminder. And then I actually started having a habit. So once I changed the hour to like 2 hours, I noticed that about once an hour, my brain would be like, oh, time to remember to breathe. And then it became a habit that I would just check in with myself and breathe. And then it became a habit that I would not only check in with myself randomly and breathe, I would also check in with myself when I felt panicked or anxious or stressed or like I felt pressure. And I would breathe then too. And it actually helped me really focus. And, you know, when you're under pressure or you feel stressed out, sometimes you're just not going to think clearly. Like I said, our brains don't think clearly under duress. We're only in survival mode, and we live that way most of the time. And so it's important to really focus on that intentional breathing. And if you don't do anything else in yoga every day, if your daily practice consists of nothing else, include breathing. Just get up 5 minutes, even 5 minutes in the morning and in the evening can help you really feel a lot more focused, a lot more even energized. Because if you think about oxygen as our life force, so the more we're able to circulate oxygen through our bodies, the more energetic we're going to feel because we're full of vitality and life. So it's important to do that. If nothing else, breathe every day. Really focus on regulating that breath for your physical body, regulating your breath so you can get your mind focused, and regulating your breath so that your focused mind can then help you align internally and be receptive to external connection. So that's really what breathing is about. That's why it's so important in yoga. That's why your entire yoga practice can be exclusively breathing. Or, you know, you can add to that or whatever, but the foundation of your yoga practice should be intentional breathing. So I have that 30-minute, it's about 30 minutes long, the guided meditation and breathing video I did. It includes movement. There's modifications, but, you know, obviously 30 minutes to cut out of your day sometimes can be a little bit challenging, but you can always take 2 minutes, 5 minutes to sit there and just breathe with yourself. You can set a timer on your phone for 2 minutes and just focus and breathe and feel yourself, check in with yourself. And the more you do that, like if you're at work, every time you get up to go to the bathroom, set a 2-minute timer on your phone. No one's gonna know the difference. And so you just breathe, just check in with yourself and breathe. And you'll find that it really does help your mind. It helps your body. It helps your how you feel, how you interact with others. Like that external connection, again, is not just in a spiritual sense, in a very metaphysical sense. It's also very real, and like I can connect with my cat sitting on the floor right now kind of way. Like we can be more receptive to things outside of us and inside of us when we regulate and focus on our breathing. So I hope that information was helpful. I'm going to go ahead and probably create some 5-minute little guided meditations and breathing exercises you can do. And of course, if you have questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And I would absolutely love to set up a time to speak with you about any issues that you have or anything specific that you want to work on. And of course, we can go over breathing then too. So happy Saturday, yogis, and have a great rest of your weekend.